Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for everybody who has joined in on Zoom. We'll keep track on admitting others as they come in. But we'd like to welcome tonight our guest speakers, Dr. Frank Clark and Tiffany Jordan. They're joining us to have a conversation about mental wellness. Most everybody who is tuning in to us tonight is an athlete or has some connection to athletics. So we appreciate you and we thank you. Cindy and I are grateful for everyone who is on. We're going to do some maneuvering because this is our first time doing this both hybrid on Zoom and on with an audience. So we do have a handful of people here. So everybody in the audience wave, do what you're missing out on. So without further ado, because we want to be mindful of time and questions, I will turn it over to Tiffany and Dr. Clark, and I'll let them take a couple of minutes to introduce themselves and give their background, and they're going to take the show. So.
Fantastic. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and jump right in. So I'm Tiffany Jordan, and I'm actually a licensed clinical professional counselor and certified alcohol and drug counselor. I live in Peoria, Illinois, and was pretty much born and raised here. Elementary school, grade school, high school, and also college in Peoria. I went to Bradley University. I ran cross country and indoor and outdoor track and field, both academic scholarship and athletic scholarship, and I graduated, it seems like ages ago, back in 2005. Shortly after I graduated, I rolled into a coaching job at Illinois Central College. I coached cross country for about 9 years there. And while I was doing that, I was working full-time as an 8th grade teacher. And while I was teaching, I was also coaching my middle school track and field team, which was a lot of fun. Also while coaching the cross country team at ICC. I went back to go get my master's at Bradley again in counseling a few years later. So I graduated in 2010 with that degree. And probably around 2014, I walked into full-time mental health therapy. I work mostly with adolescents, young adults, and adult women, a variety of issues with addictions being my specialty. So that's me in a nutshell. Oh, I'm married and I have a daughter. She's adorable.
She's also my little sister, for those of you that didn't know that. So I have to give her a shout out.
Oh yeah, she's my big sister.
Well, good evening, everyone. And my name is Frank Clark. And I want to thank Regina for inviting Tiffany and I to join you all tonight and have some fellowship and time for transparency in a safe space to discuss some important issues as it relates to mental health. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from the South Side of Chicago. I did my undergrad at Monmouth College, go Scots. Graduated in 2002, and during my time at Monmouth, I was ran track and cross country. I was also involved in the symphony as well as sang in the choir. After I graduated from Monmouth, went on to pursue my graduate studies at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine, where I graduated in 2010 with my medical doctorate. Following graduation from med school, headed to Columbia, South Carolina, where I decided to pursue a residency in psychiatry. And so I'm an adult psychiatrist. My current role is that I serve as the medical director of adult inpatient services at Prisma Health Upstate, which is located in Greenville, South Carolina. And when I'm not seeing patients, I enjoy teaching medical students and residents, and I serve as the clinical assistant professor at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville. I'm also married, and my wife and I have a beautiful daughter who is about to be 21 months. So happy to be with you all.
So Tiffany and Frank and I met on Monday, and we had some discussion about some pressing things that we felt might be of concern for our students here on campus, especially during these unique times. And so I can't remember if we decided what order each of you were going to go in, but we kind of just dissected through, you know, some topics. So I will leave it on you. Who wants to go first and who wants to jump in?
And do you want to start talking about COVID and the impacts?
Sure, be happy to. So COVID-19, it's doesn't seem like it's going to be going anywhere anytime soon. It has definitely impacted all of us in some way. I was reading a study the other day by the Kaiser Family Foundation. They put out a survey, and with the survey noted that 53% of adults in the U.S. reported that their mental health had been negatively impacted during this time, during the pandemic, due to worry and stress. So we are seeing, we're living in unprecedented times in our country as it relates to COVID and the racial injustices that we're seeing, and those two are linked in a lot of ways. But then when we think about, you know, how COVID has turned our lives upside down, you know, we have to think about a subset of the population, and which brings us here tonight to talk about college and student athletes. And Tiffany and I are both, you know, former student athletes, and you know, I can't imagine what college would have been like if we had lived through a pandemic. I think for many of us, and many of you in the audience and on this who are dialing in, most of us, I would say, the athletic arena serves as our sanctuary. It allows us to process our feelings in a healthy way. It allows us to just be ourselves, and when we're not in the classroom, we can focus our efforts on our performance and whatever that may be. If it's on the track, if it's on the football field, the soccer field, in the pool, what have you, it's a time away. And it's very cathartic in a lot of ways. I still run. I don't I don't run as much as I used to, but you know, I try to do 2 days a week for my wellness, and do a little bit of Zumba and some yoga as well, because that keeps me well. And so I can only imagine, you know, you all were probably looking forward to your seasons, and you know, and having that anticipation that you know, that it's going to be a fun season, and what comes with that, you know, the joys of being with your not only your classmates but your teammates. And so when things like COVID happen, it kind of makes you wonder, you know, what's going to happen, how does this affect me as not only a student but as a student athlete. And so what I wanted to touch on, a couple things to be mindful of, and I want to leave some take-home points for you tonight, but a couple of statistics. I think it's good to present data sometimes. I don't want to bore you with data, but I want to make sure that you have a better understanding and being mindful that this is serious in terms of the impact of COVID on a person's mental and physical health. So as it pertains to student athletes, I'm not sure if you're all aware, the NCAA did a well-being study recently looking at the impact of COVID on student athletes' physical and mental well-being. And I want to share some highlights from that study with you. So the participants, there were over 37,000 participants. And this is a survey that they surveyed all divisions, so Division I, Division II, Division III, and all sports. So it was a pretty inclusive study. What they found, just some of the highlights. A third of individuals who took the survey reported disturbances in their sleep. A quarter of individuals stated that they were feeling sad and had a sense of loss. 90% of individuals stated that they actually felt positive about keeping up with their schoolwork and passing their exams. which kind of makes you wonder, it's difficult to be a student athlete. You're juggling both trying to be the best student that you can be, but also trying to be the best athlete that you can be. Other things that noted in the study was that there were high rates of mental distress. And so for me, studies like this kind of reiterate the importance of self-care. And again, during times of a pandemic, I would say we're experiencing two pandemics, one being COVID and then the other being the racial injustices. But as it relates to COVID, again, if the athletic arena serves as a sanctuary for you, now you have to think about, okay, I don't have that outlet. So what can I do to keep well? And what I was what I also noted in the study was that a lot of the student athletes, 90% of them in the survey stated that they communicated with their teammates and their coaches multiple times during the week. And I think that is so key, is to have that communication, especially when isolation seems to be the norm and not the anomaly anymore. We talk about social distancing. I actually think that term should be discarded. We should actually be talking more about physical distancing, because I think social distancing implies, oh my God, like I can't be around anyone. Well, you can be around people, you just have to properly physical distance 6 feet apart. And we don't want people to feel isolated. I can only imagine right now on a college campus, if you're used to bonding with your teammates and having that fellowship every day, it would feel isolating to know that that can't happen for obvious reasons with the pandemic. So what that study, again, reiterates for me is the importance of communicating, reaching out to those who care about you, whether they be your coach, your teammate, your parents, your mentors, your professors, making sure that you have a support network, especially during this time. The last thing I'll say before I end, I think sometimes when we're in crisis, crisis have a way of helping us reflect on a lot of things about ourselves. So I think there's a good time for introspection. I try to find the silver linings during times of crisis. At least that's what my therapist, I do my own therapy, the self-disclosure, because I got to take care of myself. If I can't take care of myself, I can't take care of other people. But my therapist always encourages me to find the silver linings and things. And so you may say, well, what's the silver lining in COVID? At least for me, it's been spending more time with my family, or it's allowed me to pursue other interests. And I say that because I want to make sure that you all remember that you are not defined by your athletic prowess and how good you are on the field or on the track or how on the soccer field. First and foremost, you're human beings, as we all are. And as human beings, we all have special gifts. We are all unique. And so I think during this time, one of the things that I would embolden you to do is to do some reflection, if you haven't already, to think about, who am I outside of the athletic arena? Because I think COVID is forcing us in some ways to think about, to not take things for granted. I'm a huge sports fan, and a lot of things are canceled. Thankfully, the NBA now has the playoffs and the bubble, but it's not the same without the fans, right? Even virtually, ESPN is having to replay old games, and which is fun in a lot of ways, because I'm a huge Bulls fan and a Michael Jordan fan. But we have to think outside the box, and that's what I want to encourage you all to do during this difficult time, is to remember that your identity doesn't rest on athletics. It's a part of you, but it's not all of you. And so I would love to hear, as we get into the discussion, kind of what you've been reflecting on during this time, because I think it's going to be important moving forward that this won't be the last pandemic that I think we're going to experience. This won't be the last time that you all experience adversity, or any of us experience adversity. And so it's going to be important for us to be mindful of how we're going to tackle that adversity, so that we can stay well and thrive in society. Thank you.
Awesome, Frank. Thank you for sharing. I think everything you said was so poignant and very timely, and I wholeheartedly agree with all of it. Um, I get to see a lot of clients in and out of my office on a regular basis, and um, COVID-19 has impacted every single client I have. Several of them are athletes, a lot of them are not, some of them are adults, some of them are adolescents, some of them are younger teens. And COVID has affected so many aspects of our life that it's pretty much impossible to identify all of them. But if you take a moment and consider how has COVID affected my life, both athletically, both personally, just socially, academically, classes that have gone online versus in person, it's touched everything. And I like to describe it as kind of this big shaking, and things that weren't nailed down or weren't totally stable have now, kind of fallen. And it actually, like Frank said, gives you a really great time of reflection to consider what are some of the things that we've been doing, the ways that we've been operating that needed to change anyway. And now we're actually forced to do that. I recently gave a talk to a group of professionals, like working with teachers and parents and students and just a variety of people in our community. And I talked a great deal about the idea of acceptance. When we come to a point of crisis, a lot of times we spend our energy being upset and mad and focusing on the fact that things are the way they are. And we really want them to be different. And I'm with you. I want them to be different. I want you to be able to have your seasons. I want the freedom to move about. I don't want to wear a mask everywhere that I go, but these are the times that we're in. And so you can spend a lot of energy being very upset that your circumstances are what they are. And I'm not saying you should minimize that, because there's real feeling, there's real grief that comes with the losses that you've experienced, from socially to loss of seasons and just everything that comes with that. So there's no need to minimize it. What I encourage people to do, especially in times like this, is to consider, okay, here's where we are. This is what we have. This is what we're working with. And based on that, what can I do from here, as opposed to spending a great deal of time being greatly upset that it is what it is. So we grieve, and that is a process. And we don't know what things are going to look like in the future, so we may be grieving some more if things don't go back to some semblance of normal, which is going to be different than what normal was before. We're going to have to wrap our minds around that. Things will be done differently moving forward in the future. So a lot of times when we have these points of reflection, these like times that force us to think about, how we've been doing life from, again, academically, athletically, student, athlete, like what do we do with that? And oftentimes, oftentimes it forces us to kind of take a look at ourselves and how we've handled crisis along the way. Because again, like Frank said, this is not the last crisis we're going to come, probably not the last pandemic we'll ever experience. However, how you handle times like this is very telling. And he mentioned the idea of self-care, which is huge when it comes down to mental health, because a lot of times we don't put as much effort or as much time into being healthy mentally as we do maybe physically. The gym, I would consider that to be great therapy for me. If I'm mad or upset or struggling with something, I can go to the gym, sweat it out, and work it out there. But like you said, it's also nice to have your counselor, and I have mine too. So it's very needed, because you have to invest in that as much as you invest in other areas of your life. Because in times like this, it's going to show where you have kind of weaknesses or things that you need to shore up. So self-care is this, this whole idea of, taking care of yourself. And a lot of times it's often characterized as, going to eat some chocolate, or going to take a bubble bath, or doing something kind of extra special for yourself to feel better. Some people consider using drugs as a form of self-care. We're going to talk about that more deeply in a moment. But self-care, one of the best articles I read a long time ago had this quote about self-care, and it's not bath salts, it's not chocolate, it's not ice cream, it's not all those extra things that you do to feel, give yourself a boost or feel better. It's actually creating a life that you don't feel the need to regularly escape from. So right now, like the way that things are, if you're feeling the need to greatly escape from life as it is, and I get times of wanting to escape from life as it is, but if you feel that way on a fairly regular basis, then something's wrong. and we need to take a look at kind of how you're doing life. And unfortunately, we live in a culture right now, and it's definitely invaded athletic culture, where we don't quite like to feel pain or too much discomfort, or at least kind of face up to that, because it's just that, it's uncomfortable. So when we start to feel uncomfortable, quite often we'll start self-medicating or numbing in a lot of different ways. I'm gonna tell you the truth, straight up, we all numb in some way, shape, or form. Whatever your flavor is, it may not necessarily be a substance, it may be binge watching Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, whatever it is you like to tune into. It may be food, may be your thing, you know, drugs may be your thing. Hopefully not. However, if that is the case, understand that anytime we find ourselves numbing or simply trying to escape without dealing with what's actually going on, you're actually just making matters worse. Throwing some statistics out there for you, some probably somewhat disturbing statistics, is pretty much 1 out of every 10 adults or teens has a problem with substance use. And about only 11% of that population actually gets any help. And probably one of the biggest drugs of abuse, because it's so easy to get, is weed, marijuana, and it's not seen as a big deal. Now, I'm gonna tell you, if I had to come, I have pretty strong opinions about weed and use in general. But I will say that one thing that seems to be pretty huge as far as beliefs are concerned is the idea that, you know, weed, cannabis is not dangerous. And a lot of people have made that jump in that belief simply because weed has been considered not as dangerous as other substances. But you got to clearly understand, one, it is addictive. And there's a lot of behaviors and outcomes that are correlated with marijuana use that you really don't want to be factors in your life. As far as the academic side, again, student first, athlete second. When it comes down to it, regular marijuana use is associated with lower grades, not necessarily causes lower grades, but it's associated with lower grades. It's also associated with you being less likely to actually graduate if you are using on a regular basis. If you're already anxious and you're self-medicating an anxiety disorder, you can actually be more anxious on the other side after using than you ever were before you started using. Not to mention any other substances such as alcohol and pills and you know, any other drug of abuse that someone would get their hands on and choose to use. We live in a culture of, again, not necessarily wanting to experience any great discomfort. So it's also very important to note that quite often one major risk factor for even, you know, developing suicidal ideation or even suicide attempts is self-medicating an emerging mental health related issue that puts you at greater risk for suicide in the midst of everything else that we're dealing with right now. So without having specific questions about marijuana use that I would love to answer if you have them, so definitely send those questions out when it comes down to it. If you find yourself having issues with weed, and that is having difficulty stopping using, I had a young lady in my office earlier this week who was very angry at her parents for having an issue with her using weed when they didn't tell her this before. They told her this before, she claimed they didn't. But at the end of the day, one of the biggest issues, she started to recognize that it became a problem. She said, I couldn't eat without smoking. I didn't want to go to school, or I wouldn't go to school without smoking. I couldn't sleep without smoking. It became such an integral part of her life, and she was developing a dependency, which is very possible. So I will say this, in the midst of times like this, again, with all of us kind of choosing the ways that we numb, we need to be very aware of what those ways are and the impacts they're actually having on us. Because if we're not dealing with the roots of the issue, then our numbing or our self-medicating, you know, specifically even in the area of substance use and abuse, things are only going to get worse, and it may end up sidelining you once you get an opportunity to be back in play. So I'm very open to any questions that you might have in regards to that.
Okay, we're going to open up some questions here with our live audience. And then if any of our guests that have Zoomed in, if you have a question, if you want to unmute yourself and turn on your camera, we're happy to pull those in as well.
Hi, my name is Yasina, and I have a question about athletes. Thank you guys so much for being here.
You know what? Why don't we do this? Why don't we just have her come up and talk into the regular mic. As I said, you're our guinea pigs. This is the first time that we've done this way, so we're learning. So Sai is going to come up and introduce herself again and ask a question. Okay. I don't think you can see me go. No, I can't. Oh.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, thank you guys so much for being here. My name is Yasina, and I just have a question about the mental state of athletes whenever they perform through discomfort. Because I've been having conversations with my friends. We run cross country here at Monmouth, and I think that we're crazy. Like, I think that there's a certain degree of madness that athletes have because we go through so much pain during practices and we keep going and going and going, and it's not normal. So can you guys answer that?
My first thought is, I think you do have to be a little off to be an athlete and do some of the things we do. I remember in college having a stress fracture, actually multiple stress fractures. And I remember this crazy thought that I didn't really need to be able to walk, I just needed to be able to run. So I was on crutches and in a boot most of the day and sat around, but I still went to practice, especially because it was my last year and I wasn't gonna get a chance to do it again. So I was gonna run. I put my blood, sweat, and tears into it, and I wasn't about to lose out on that opportunity. So, you know, as far as the mental state of athlete, I would say there's a combination of some like internal pressures and drives, as well as some external pressures and drives, especially for, you know, athletes. Like, let's say your athlete is on scholarship, you know, you are expected to perform. That's what you were recruited to do, and you want to do that. And so in that respect, it's an investment that you make, and with those investments come, you know, sacrifices. Not always the most sane sacrifices, but there are sacrifices both physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, that you put in place. And so, you know, psychologically with an athlete, that you know, kind of that investment in time and energy may be more than maybe the average person. Again, to the point where we do, like you said, maybe some crazy things. That doesn't necessarily mean that thinking is always the healthiest, because there is a fine balance to strike in there, especially when it crosses over into unhealthy behaviors, such as like eating disorders and things of that nature, which it easily can. And so that's where I would encourage, you know, pretty much every athlete to one, have somebody that, you know, they're talking to if they have great opportunity, especially if they start to sense that, you know, that balance of commitment and drive is starting to get out of balance and potentially maybe causing some long-term damage.
Yeah, I would agree, Tiffany. There's, and thank you for the question. Runners, we are kind of crazy. You know, I think of sports as an addiction in a lot of ways, right? And it is a healthy addiction, but to Tiffany's point, it can also be unhealthy. you know, not to get too dorky on you guys, but if you guys remember dopamine and in the brain, and you know, we all crave something. I like gummy worms. Some people may, like you said, Tiffany said, some people may like marijuana. Well, you think about the runner's high that we talk about. If you don't have that, you kind of go into withdrawal because you're releasing those endorphins, and it makes you feel good. But like I said too, there can be the pendulum can shift the other way. I remember after my collegiate career, you know, I would run a little bit in medical school. I started to run more in residency because it kept me balanced, but I still struggle with this at times. And I talked to my wife about it and my therapist, where if I'm not running, I feel guilty. If I see someone running down on the streets or wherever, I almost have to feel like, well, am I lazy? Like, I need to get out and get my running shoes on. And it's taken me a while to realize that, look, you know, I had my, you know, I enjoyed college. I enjoyed track and cross country. I don't have to, if I don't want to run, I don't have to run. But again, our brains are primed to, how the brain craves, how some people who are addicted to marijuana, their brains will always crave marijuana. Our brains will, as athletes, will always, we have that competitive drive. Like, we'll never lose it. We'll never lose it. I ran a half marathon 2 years ago, and I wasn't in the best shape, but my friends encouraged me to jump in and pace them. And that was the dumbest thing I probably ever did. Now, I did well for not training, but you know, I started to, as people were starting to pass me at mile 10, I became angry because I'm like, this probably wouldn't happen if I was in better shape. But again, it just goes to that competitive edge. The last thing I'll say is you want to be mindful of something called overtraining syndrome, because that in itself can lead to injury. You know, there's a healthy balance, and so, you know, if you're training, and I know the coaches at Monmouth, I know you guys aren't overtraining because I know Coach Haynes and wouldn't allow that to happen. So, you know, the coaches are very mindful of that. But I think sometimes athletes, we push ourselves so much that then it becomes deleterious to our health. Then you get, you know, injuries, and then that sets you back because psychologically now you're like, oh, I failed at something, when you really haven't failed. It means to take a break. So that's coming back to knowing yourself and knowing, back to what Tiffany said, recognizing that self-care is important.
Well, thank you very much for the very descriptive answers. That's all I have, guys.
Other questions? No, nothing. No. They're pretending like they're a quiet bunch. I don't
There's a
believe
question
that, though.
behind you.
How did you see that and I didn't?
He put his finger up.
Hi, how y'all doing? I'm Ivan.
Hi. Hi, Ivan.
So this is my gratitude experience. You said that your therapist told you to try and find a silver lining in things. I was just kind of wondering, what type of things do you do to try and, you know, see those silver linings? Because it's very easy to get clouded by so many things that are going on in your life to forget about those. You forget about the sad things.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Ivan. That's a great question. I'm not always the best at finding the silver lining, so let me just say that. But for me, the first thing I think about is my family. In terms of, so I tend to travel a lot. So so not only do I have my my job at the hospital, but I'm involved in a lot of medical organizations and committees, which then results in me traveling at least 5 to 6 times a year. And so one of the silver linings in this pandemic has been, it's kind of a pros and cons, right? I'm used to traveling. I'm used to getting on a plane and spending time with colleagues and friends that I haven't seen at meetings and catching up and and advocating for not only my patients, but our profession as mental health professionals. And I haven't been able to do that in terms of getting on a plane. And so while that is sad because I love to travel, the silver lining for me is I have more time at home. My wife is happy about that. My daughter is happy about that. And she doesn't really understand what daddy does right now. But, you know, one of the things I said to myself whenever I got married and I had a family, I wanted to make sure that my daughter or son, wherever, you know, that they would know that I'm present. And I think that's very important. So the other silver lining for me, you know, at one point the gyms were closed. Now running, I can run outside, so that's good. But again, I like to alternate my workouts. So I do Zumba and other things at the gym. Again, that kind of takes me away from family, but you know, I'm a better person after I work out. Just ask my wife. So, you know, we all get comfortable and things. So, but silver lining, you know, virtual, right? You can do online workouts. So our daughter gets, she loves to see daddy work out. And maybe I'm kind of grooming her. She might be a runner, who knows? But she'll do yoga poses with me. She will, if I do a body combat class, she wants to join in. She has no idea what is going on, but she sees her daddy doing those exercises. And for me, that puts a smile on my face because that's family time that I probably wouldn't get if I was at the gym, you know, spending an hour, again, an hour worth it, but again, family. The last silver lining that I've thought about in this whole pandemic has been kind of a resurgence for me in terms of writing. So I tend to write a lot of poetry, and I self-published a book back in 2014, a book of poetry called The Other Side. And you know, self-disclosure, I went through my own clinical depression when I was in medical school, and been in remission now for over 10 years. But again, I still do my therapy to stay well. And one of the things that keeps me, that I think protects me or decreases my risk from having another episode of depression is writing. And so there's a lot to write about these days, right? COVID, how that's impacting us. Again, the racial injustices of how that's impacting our society. So I've actually used this time to write some more, write poetry and actually have been able to publish it. So those are some of the silver linings for me.
I think those are awesome. You know, I guess in regards to silver linings, you know, and how to find them. Again, this is a great season to cultivate some really good practices. And one of the best antidotes to even, you know, depression of any kind, and there's like definitely kind of COVID inspired depression right now, is developing an attitude of gratitude. You may have heard this before. And it's really a daily practice of actually identifying something that you're grateful for on the regular basis. It's like, this is almost better than like any drug you can take because it's not going to cost you anything, maybe a little brain power and maybe even some conversation with people that are encouraging, but to actually take a moment and to say, okay, I'm here, I'm living, I'm breathing. You know, what are some things that I'm grateful for in my life? I'm grateful that I have coaches who actually care about me, that reach out to me and check up on me. I'm grateful for, you know, the teammates that I have who, you know, are in this with me. I'm not going through this by myself. I'm grateful that I can actually be back on campus instead of staying home because I really wanted to get out of my house. Like, I'm grateful. It's really just taking a moment to identify what you are actually grateful for. And these are things that like COVID didn't take away from you, you know, the situation. These are things that maybe it highlighted and magnified for you that you've taken for granted along the way. Silver linings, you know, they're all over because COVID has forced us to kind of slow down and pause. There's a lot of meetings I don't have to go to, hallelujah, because sometimes they're boring. There was a job I was going to take that I'm so grateful that I didn't take. I didn't know a pandemic was coming, and it would have been a hardship being in that job. So I would say for you, if you're trying to find silver linings and it's tough, start with cultivating kind of an attitude of gratitude, and each day pick something that you're grateful for that, again, COVID can't take away from you. It's something that you have and maybe you've been reminded is important.
I guess on that note, I guess I'm grateful for y'all. I appreciate you answering my question. Thank you guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
No? No questions? We have anybody in the in our cyber world who has any questions in there?
I have a question for some of your athletes. Anybody who's willing to kind of step up and take up, like how are you folks handling, you know, COVID and seasons being put on pause? Like I like to hear like individuals, like how are you handling, you know, this time? Just anybody.
Why don't you pop back up here? It's not gonna go very far.
Hi. I'm just, I guess I'm just grinding harder. I'm taking time as like a preseason, and I'm just working out with my teammates like every day.
Has that been enough?
Yeah, I think for the most part, yeah. Obviously, not one thing can be always enough, but I think for the most part, I'm happy. Thanks.
We had a 2-week period where coaches and athletes were not able to have contact. So we're on week 4. So just these last 2 weeks, our coaches and athletes have all been able to start kind of interacting and doing some basic practices and agility work and strength work, and our gym has reopened. So I feel like, and I think Cindy would agree, I think I've seen more smiling faces from our athletes than it looked those first couple of weeks. It was pretty tough. We've been pretty stringent here on campus because we want to keep everybody here. So we've got like 75 days left to the end of the semester. Countdown. We've got another question or comment. Answer.
Yeah, so this is an answer to the question that you asked. How am I coping with like COVID and being an athlete? So I'm an international student. I'm from Kenya, and I actually, this is something that not a lot of people would like hearing, but I feel like not having competition during the weekends has been an advantage for me, because in my freshman year, everything was just speeding by so fast, because I could never stay on campus. I'd never get to meet my campus friends because I'd practice every single day. So now I have more time to spend with them. And the fact that I've been in the States for longer than I intended to be, I like that we actually have time to spend on campus. Like just to relax and get to know campus friends and not only my teammates. So yeah, I like it.
That's your silver lining.
Yeah.
Other thing. Are you sure? I think everybody's pretty quiet here. I'll go back to the full group. Anybody online have a question or comment? Well, we're pushing right about an hour. So Frank and Tiffany, do you have any, we're grateful for you being with us tonight. Do you have any closing words, last pearls of wisdom for everyone before we close out?
Or Tiffany, you want to go?
You can go first.
Closing. Let's see. I'm gonna say, well, I tend to use this couple words that I tend to use throughout the day when I'm working with patients at the hospital and when I'm teaching residents and med students. So if I could leave you with any words of wisdom tonight, it would be to be kind to yourself and to have self-compassion, especially during these difficult times. I think Tiffany hit the nail on the head when she talked about gratitude, and I think that is extremely important. Or positive affirmations. Looking at yourself in the mirror and remembering your self-truths, who you are as a person, what you like about yourself, because as Tiffany said, COVID can't take that away. It's a difficult season that we're in, but again, I find that this is my new quote, that you can't experience resiliency without adversity. I'll repeat that again. You can't experience resiliency without adversity. We're all going through adversity right now in some way, shape, or form. You all as college students will go through adversity, and that doesn't end when you graduate from college. So consider the pandemic a trial and a tribulation, but know that during these trials and tribulations, it's a testament to who you are as a person. And all of you, I'm going to guess that all of you are pretty resilient and that you're going to persevere during this time. As Tiffany said, you don't have to like what happens to you, but it is what it is, right? Radical acceptance is something that we can all benefit from. So just take care of yourself. Don't be silent. If you are feeling some kind of way, if you are feeling depressed, reach out. If you are feeling overwhelming anxiety, reach out to whoever you feel comfortable talking with. Don't be silent. And so just take care of yourself and have that self-compassion.
Absolutely. I think that's well said. Just keep in mind, we're all in this together. And so seasons that got canceled, it wasn't just yours. I've known high schoolers who are looking to get recruited who actually moved to different places so that they could play, so that they could be seen to get recruited and play on the college level. And not everyone has the luxury to be able to do things like that. I just want to reiterate, you have skills, all the skills that you use on your fields of play, whatever they may be, to dig deep in the middle of competition and keep going, or in practice to show up, like you have these skills. And it's like those skills that translate in times like these that, help you develop that resiliency and enable you to get through tough times. So make sure you use your support systems. Like Frank said, if there's something going on, definitely speak up, because we're all feeling some kind of way about how things are going right now. And it's so much easier if we talk about it, because then, we don't feel alone. And who knows, you may discover something that someone else is doing that can help you get through, the next moment until we figure out what we're going to do for the rest of the year or even after that. And I will say, even though things don't always seem to be good, with your support system, there's not a single thing that you can't make it through. So don't suffer in silence, get the help that you need. And if you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to answer your questions.
All right. Thank you, friends and family. So it is, I believe, right at 7:54. If we don't have any other questions from the audience or concerns, I think that we will sign off for the evening. And Frank and Tiffany, I look forward to working with you again next week. We'll be in touch. And everybody who joined in virtually, we appreciate all of you. And if there are any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to Cindy and I. We know how to get a hold of both of these fine professionals. And so we will solicit their help and input as much as we possibly can. So have a wonderful evening, everyone. And
Bye, everybody.
we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.